I would just say that I associate works with social practice that in which social interactions are really kind of at the forefront of the practice, that the practices are about social interactions that stage somehow social exchange. It could be in the form of a dialogue or some kind of participatory activity, but where that really is central to what the work is, and that could be at the level of its form, sort of how it takes form, or also could be tied to its content. And I think in our case it's both.
There are a lot of terms for the sort of art that we do. You know, relational aesthetics, you know, ranging from more academic to less academic, experimental geography, and that social practice, I think, is a term that's been used more on the West Coast and in Los Angeles, and I think it has its advantages and disadvantages. I'm personally not a huge fan. I tend to use the term art actions, which I think is not enough of an umbrella term, but is a little bit more, gets at, I think, what artists do. I think that for me, a little bit of the problem with social practice is that it doesn't really get at sort of the creative component, I think, of what artists do in these practices. And so for me, it's more that we engage in practices that engage really critical social, environmental, political, economic issues, and really challenge people to see and make visible our connections to nature and each other, and to re-see and reimagine those connections.
Social interaction is always a really important aspect of all of our products or what we produce, whether it's a campfire program, or you know, a circle of people around a campfire having a discussion, drawing from the National Park Service tradition, which is sort of this very intimate kind of environment that's about coming together and facing one another for a discussion in a very disarmed kind of flowing way, or a guided hike where you're headed out into a landscape and it's really external prompts along the way that you're at the same time kind of collectively discovering and exploring and discussing. So we really do think of ourselves as facilitators more than straightforward educators. Like, the goal is to really activate people and to help people sort of make connections.
We had a project called the LA River Ramble, which was a project that was part of our MoCA residency, where we created 3 projects in downtown Los Angeles. And the LA River, as everyone knows, is a concrete sewer, essentially. And there's huge projects to revitalize it right now, which have potentially huge consequences for what it's like to live in Los Angeles, and for making LA more livable, more sustainable, and more equitable. And so we took this space downtown, which is completely shut off by industry. We call it the undergrowth of infrastructure, regulation, and forgetting. And we created an event called LA River Ramble, where people started at MoCA Geffen, and they had to hike through the arts district. And then we created a map where we renamed all of the buildings in the arts district. So the toy, you know, lofts, warehouse lofts, become like the riverfront toy warehouse lofts, and Verskush, the sausage place, becomes Verskush am Fluss, you know, by the river. So the idea was that we created this space that's one of the most important spaces of nature in Los Angeles. It's one of the most important public spaces in Los Angeles, but it's not seen as nature, and is not seen or experienced as public. And we created this experiential project where people could experience the river as both natural and as a really important public space, and they could do that in a really large group within the city together.
The reason that the ranger figure from the beginning has been the personality that we inhabit is because it's a very accessible language. That figure and this very down-to-earth language has really lubricated, if you will, or allowed for conversations that I think wouldn't be easy often. People tend to be very comfortable having their voice heard and offering their opinions and their stories when they're in the context of one of these programs, compared to, for instance, going to a panel discussion in a gallery or at UCLA or Otis.
I mean, it's a character that's also...
Yeah. No, go ahead.
Especially good because rangers, you know, park rangers are the guardians of America's great public spaces. Like our great, you know, what we think of as the real public spaces in America. So it's turned out, I think, in ways that maybe we didn't anticipate, or certainly I didn't when we started off, to be a really excellent character for reclaiming public spaces as public spaces. Would you say, Emily?
Yeah, and just this idea, which is not our own idea, it's a, you know, people have written about this, of course, who theorize space and social space, but this idea that sort of public space isn't this thing that exists out there. Of course, it's defined in part by regulation and management, but it's also defined by presence. So by being a group of people and occupying a place, we create public space through this kind of public behavior. And
to also address this issue of play, I want to come back to just for a moment, because I think that's enormously important in what not only we do, but a lot of these collectives and artists do. And I think it's easy to mistake play for being frivolous or not addressing a question seriously or not really being interested in real change. And, you know, when we design a project, our first day or so looks pretty deadly dull because we're really interested in kind of the foundation of that project and asking really, you know, questions that we think are important, like, you know, why is this issue important? What's going on in downtown? What's the history of redevelopment, you know, downtown? Or what's the history of the problems with public space in Los Angeles? And then using play and friendliness and fun
hospitality.
Part of what?
Hospitality.
It's sort of strategies, really. I mean, we really want people to have fun.